podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket.
This week we're talking about grief, specifically about grieving and death. And it's such a paradoxical experience in that you can be laughing one minute and crying the next and angry the next, and feelings are up and down or feeling numb. It can be linear in terms of going through the stages of grief and non-linear. It can be an experience of trusting that the person is with the Lord and one of missing that person terribly. And all of these things can be happening all at the same time or in rapid fire sequence. So we're talking a little bit about our own experiences of grief and of walking with those who are grieving. And we hope that it's helpful for you, especially for those who might have lost somebody or who have people close to them who've lost somebody recently. And please know that we're praying for you. God bless you.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Sorry.
That was such a long pause. I was like, hello. And it was like,
well, usually I like give a little
Silence.
thumbs up as soon as I hit record. And I just
Oh.
didn't do that this time because I don't know why I just didn't. So
I saw
anyway,
the little red light. You know,
Yes.
It's not a red light. It's a red dot.
Yeah.
A little
Right.
red dot.
recording.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yes.
I'm still very analog in my mind. I realized like
Mhm.
you know what? I'm a late 80s baby. And I did, in whatever music stuff that I did growing up that involved any kind of playing with other musicians or like recording it all or whatever, I'm like used to sort of red lights and analog things.
Right.
And
Mhm.
even when we do digital things, I'm still a very analog
Yeah,
person.
that's fair.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that carries through.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. So
yeah.
welcome.
Right.
Hi.
Hi.
You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Rachel.
Nice. I'm Erin.
And I'm Nicole.
And we're the ladies who are your hosts for In the Thicket. And we are so happy that you are joining us. Thank you so much. I mean, we say this sometimes, but maybe not often enough. We're just like very grateful for everybody who is listening. And we really hope that,
Yeah.
you know, we're
Totally.
just, our prayers always like the Lord is somehow using these conversations for those who need to hear them. So if you need to hear them and this is hopefully giving you life, we praise God for that. And if there's anyone who you think might benefit from this conversation, send it on over.
Yeah.
But that's always our prayer. And we're always really grateful to be with you guys. So
Yes. And we pray for you. I do anyways. I
We
can't
do.
speak to these ladies, but
I feel like
pray for you every single day. Every day I bring all of our listeners to the feet of the Lord. And
that's
then
so beautiful.
That's so beautiful. And you guys, Erin is a consecrated virgin. So she's like, she's a
Right.
spouse of Jesus. So she's
my
like
job.
pretty close to him, you know?
That's right.
Yeah,
So
pretty
it's,
tight.
you've got Erin
Yeah.
praying for you. It's
That's
good.
right. That's good.
Yeah.
Not that all of our prayers aren't equally.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, we'll just
But,
say that
like-
mine are probably better than everybody's.
I don't know. You just
and-
have you probably have a special place in his heart. Like
no,
your
our
own
secret prayer partner has
Yeah,
she's
she's
some
pretty-
very efficacious prayers. I would just
It's
like
true.
to say, because even this morning she prayed for Nicole for
So
Nicole's internet. Yeah.
Yes. So my internet now, okay. So my internet was not working this morning. So I went on like hotspot on my computer and I went on like the internet website or whatever. And then you can like run diagnostics and stuff. So I did that and they told me to like unplug the modem and plug it back in. And then they like analyze it and it said it still wasn't working. So then I like messaged these ladies and was like, okay, we're going to record tonight. I don't know. Pray for me. It's not working.
Mhm.
Scheduled an appointment for tomorrow. And then I went back and I actually went and looked at the modem thingy. I'm pointing because it's right over there. And then I noticed that the lights were actually working. So then I switched my computer over to our regular Wi-Fi and then it worked. So then I messaged and our secret prayer partner said that she had just prayed. So
Yeah.
it was maybe a combo of the prayers and then actually maybe the unplugging and plugging back in and boom, you know, effort
That's
and
what-
grace.
That's right. Exactly. That's why they always tell you to unplug it. I remember sometimes my mom gets so mad because I'll be like, or like something's not working on our phone. I'm like,
Yeah.
have you turned it on and then turned it off again?
Right.
And she's like, well, that shouldn't affect anything. And I'm like, okay, but It's
It
because there's
does.
processes and they
kinda
just
does
accumulate and accumulate, and sometimes they just need a reset, like just for all the
Exactly.
extraneous stuff. Just like, well, that shouldn't have to be done. Like, well, that's
Did you guys-
why
Did you guys
I
ever
feel-
watch the show The IT Crowd?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't
I
seen all of it,
tried
but
and I couldn't
really
like get
funny.
into it.
really?
I thought it was hilarious. It is. It's like
I
a
have to
very
look it up.
wacky kind of weird humor, but that they're like it's like IT folks, and that's like their thing of how they answer the phone. Hi, this is IT. Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again?
Yeah,
And it's just that's like a running joke.
Yeah.
It's the guy
Whole
from
show.
Bridesmaids who plays the love interest of
Oh yeah.
Kristen,
That's right. Yeah, Kristen Wiig.
who I think
yeah,
is very funny. I'm gonna be honest. Like,
I
I mean,
know, I do too.
yeah. Anyways,
Mhm.
comedy, love
Mhm.
it.
Comedy.
Oh,
Can I just say
comedy.
that now? So you guys have been gone from Canada for long enough, but now Bell, for example, when you call for support stuff
Mhm.
on the phone, like it automatically.
Bell is a
re-
Wi-Fi provider and a phone
Yeah,
Yeah.
service
phone,
provider.
TV,
It's one of the
internet,
big
like
five
everything.
of
Mhm.
the phone
Mhm.
services
People.
oligopoly or whatever in
Right, yeah.
Canada.
In
So
Canada.
basically there's like two that are like the
Mhm.
major ones, and then they
Okay.
throw a bone to three other ones that are like, oh, you're included in the big thing. Except
Yeah.
for most of them are Bell and Rogers. Anyways, especially in Ontario.
Mm.
So Bell now has a thing that if you call for any kind of service, it just automatically remotely turns your modem off and on again, or your stuff off and on again.
That's
So
good.
you don't have to do anything.
Huh.
Yeah, which is great, except for it's such a piss off if you're like,
If that's not your problem.
yeah, if you're
I'm like-
calling, like, like, so anytime you call support, it does that. So if you're calling for billing, it doesn't. But if you've already done it and then you're calling, and then it adds like however long it anyways. So it's like efficiency for the company and non-efficiency for the
For everyone
consumer.
For the people who
Yeah.
are already efficient to know kind of
Yeah.
technology
Oh
stuff.
boy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That
that's
is like,
okay.
that is sort of like, I feel like a time off purgatory kind of thing when you're on the
Mhm.
phone with
Yeah.
your phone, your cell phone provider,
That's right.
or it just kills you. You're like, this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
and oh my gosh, I have this, where the song that I have
Yes.
such, like, it calls forth every ounce of virtue inside of my body
Mhm.
when I have to sit for like 3 hours, and there's just
Listen.
literally the same whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely anything, right? Anything.
Yeah.
If you're not going to answer the phone for 3 freaking hours and you have the same song playing for 3 hours, and
There's-
I can't turn it off because I have to wait until a human
Mhm.
being answers my call.
Yes. Mhm.
There's one, you guys, I don't remember who it is, but there's some company that I've called and I'm like, oh, I like this song, and I can listen to it. I can listen to it on repeat, and I enjoy it the whole
my
time.
gosh.
That's great.
And part of it is because sometimes a song comes on and it sounds like an old radio from like the
Yes.
1940s or something.
Oh, yeah.
Analog.
And,
Yes.
and it's like, this is actually, it's like good sound quality and like an interesting piece of music, and probably has like a cool chord progression. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and analyze the chord progression. And then it comes back around and like analyze it again.
Yes.
Wait, I didn't quite get that. So I don't know. It's the right level for my like nerdy music brain.
Mhm.
I love
But I couldn't
that.
tell you who it is. I don't remember.
There's
But
one guy who
there's-
did like one of the popular ones that's like do 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 do
Yeah.
do do, and then it like adds all these like funky synth noises and things to it and stuff like that. But there's
good.
one guy who does like a dance to it.
Yeah, there's a
like,
couple who does. There's like a married couple who does one to that too, to all the
Oh,
Apple
yeah.
ringtones.
Fair.
Yep.
And like
Also,
different
yeah,
things.
so that one is Costin Mayer.
Oh, yeah, that's
Costin Mayer.
Costin Mayer,
That's it. Yeah. But this guy does like a split screen thing where it's like he starts out with like the basic track, and then he does like this dance to it, and then like when it adds another instrument or goes in a different, then he splits into 2 screens, and then he's got both of him like doing. It's the best. There's like millions of views for that reel.
Oh,
Anyways,
great.
so if you know who I'm talking about, then you can give him credit on Instagram. You can tag
Find
him in
him.
this episode.
Yeah. That would
I
be
wonder-
so weird.
Like,
Can you
what?
imagine? He'd be like, what the heck is like,
Yeah,
especially because of our topic today, which has
Yes.
absolutely nothing to do with anything we
Right.
talked about so far.
yeah. Exactly.
Although I also want to add that I'm drinking golden milk because we talked about this before,
Mhm,
and Erin
mhm.
was like, "That's the most disgusting thing I've ever
Mhm.
heard about in my
Yes.
life."
No,
But I really like it.
Erin likes to food shame people, and it's okay. We
I
accept and love it
do.
about her.
Yes.
Erin, Rachel, I was going to tell you this. So my husband loves to buy foods that he's never bought before, and then he buys
Oh,
them first and then figures out what to do with them. And
that's fun.
so he usually has an idea. And so like he's bought things like chicken hearts
Wow.
and I don't know, just like all kinds of stuff like that. Pig's feet. I don't know.
Yeah.
So his latest one was he bought like
Yummy.
fresh turmeric root.
Oh yeah, right.
And then we've been using it because I like to make kind of some lentil dal and like they grated fresh turmeric into it, which is good. But he's been making like some probably variation of golden milk because he made this like turmeric, like fresh turmeric, fresh ginger, hot water like tea with a bit of honey or maple. I think he put maple syrup.
Good.
It was so good. Anyway,
That
so
sounds good.
I've become accustomed to turmeric now. We have like a bunch of turmeric roots in my fruit bowl right now. It's
That's
great.
so funny.
Yeah.
That is really good for your throat. Though, so Nicole and I
Yeah.
are also kind of sick right now, and
Yes.
Nicole, I'm on the sort of better end of that stick right now, I think. But this is definitely helping. So
That's good. Maybe you should send me the recipe after, Rachel.
Yeah,
so that
it's
I
really
can
easy.
also be on the better end of being sick. I'm currently drinking just chicken broth straight up. So homemade chicken broth.
Nice.
This is like such a fun, totally unrelated conversation to
Yes,
what
it's good.
what our topic
yeah.
is.
Erin,
It's
what
very
are you
true.
drinking? Are you drinking anything interesting?
Nothing. I ate an arrowroot cookie. I had some apple juice a little while ago, and I have
Nice.
water.
Okay.
That's it.
Classic.
No wine
All right.
tonight.
I know.
Mm.
Usually we can count on you for some alcohol.
I
on
know.
an evening episode.
That
true.
sounds so terrible.
No, I think that's totally. It's
I
festive.
mean,
You know.
No,
not
it's
a
because
festive
I've been
thing.
if I have like a glass of wine in the evening now, I
Mhm.
think it's the sulfates in it, but I find that I get a headache and then I feel
Yes.
terrible when
Oh
I
my
wake
gosh,
up in the morning.
guys.
Yes.
All right. Also, I really if you're here for the episode on grief, I'm so sorry
Just
because
skip
I have
ahead.
to have just literally skip ahead. We'll
That's
tell
right.
like
We're
we'll
just
put
going
it
to
in
talk
the show
about wine and
notes.
headaches
Yeah,
for a minute.
But yeah, so I just saw a talk by Father Gregory Pine a week and a bit ago, and he and I are the same age. We're both in our mid-30s, and he like we're born the same year, and he was like giving the talk, and he was like, it just sucks. He's like, now just even like one drink, it doesn't go down so good. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I know. I mean,
Right.
that is, it's not like my alcohol tolerance or something, but yeah, I just don't feel good. I
Yeah,
feel crappy.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Like,
I
I
always
can have,
enjoy.
like,
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I can have like a small glass of wine,
Mhm.
but it's like as soon as I get over a certain amount, then
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
just
man.
it's not even like gradual. It's like immediately I feel
Yeah.
terrible.
Oh,
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Ugh.
I have if I have a little small glass of wine and I can enjoy that,
Mhm.
and then I need like a really big glass of water for the
Mhm.
small glass of wine, and I have any more wine than the small glass of wine, I will get a headache. Excuse me. I will just feel
Yeah.
gross, and your throat's all dry all night.
Yeah.
And it's just,
Yeah.
I'm like,
I know,
you
right?
stop wanting it. You're like, ugh, alcohol, gross.
Yeah.
Why would I
know,
drink
but
that?
I feel like
Yeah.
such a wimp. Like my grandma was so much better. It had like they had nightcaps all the time. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm.
like, what?
Yeah.
I'm
I
like
don't-
still okay with liqueurs or with
Yeah, maybe
beer for
that's
some
different.
reason, but
It
wine
must depend on the alcohol a little bit.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
does. Yeah. Like beer is
That's
better than
true.
wine, but
I'm
Mhm.
good with like, whiskey.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Stick
so
to the
this
hard
is
stuff.
related
Yeah.
to grief. It's just a different kind of
It's
grief.
true.
The
Oh,
grief
gosh.
of growing old and
Yeah,
not
that's
being
right.
able to handle
Sorry, I
your
thought you meant the
booze.
alcohol was related to grief, and I was like, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is.
This is
Kind
working
of.
it. So this is good that the people who are here for the episode hopefully skipped over this part.
Yes,
we're
yeah.
okay. We're moving into
Okay,
the real.
I'm
Okay.
so sorry.
Moving.
We can
We're
edit
moving
that part
on.
out, maybe.
Oh
Whatever.
boy. Oh boy. Okay.
Okay.
No, but for real, I think we just, this is maybe in some ways too, I'm like kind of like avoiding talking about
Yeah.
maybe because sometimes that happens
Yeah.
when we're talking about something hard, where I'm just like, we're sort of unconsciously putting it off because it's a
Mhm.
really hard topic. And recently in my life, I'm just in contact right now with a lot of people that I really care about. Quite a few people who have lost loved ones very close to them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think part of our super long, very, very long intro is me just being like, this is a hard conversation that I don't,
Yeah.
I want to have. That's why we're having it. But also that's really hard to have because it's kind of close to home. And I'm just so like, I'm carrying these people in my heart and I just like feel the vulnerability and just like, I don't know, just the rawness of, and obviously I'm just like adjacent to it. So but I just am so aware of it. And
Mhm.
it's very difficult to talk about. And that's one of the things that I kind of want to start with, is that when you're grieving, when you've lost someone, I mean, this episode is called The Paradox of Grief, because there's this thing as Catholics, we know, we know that the Lord, he defeated death. We have this hope in the resurrection. We think of the funeral masses, like the vestments are typically white. We're really entrusting our loved one to this great, great hope that we have in God. And it's real. Like, that's real,
Mhm.
Um, and the paradox of it is, like, we really we need that. I mean, it's real, and we need to cling to that reality. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I mean, when we have the loved one, the person we love is not physically present to us anymore, like the chasm that opens up in our hearts, like the
Yeah.
depths of sorrow that can bring up, it's just, I mean, it's just such a mystery. It's just so, and when you're going through it, I mean, and that's why I think I'm kind of so hesitant about it, because I know some people going through it right now. It's just, you don't even know how to touch that. You don't even know
Mhm.
how to
Mm-hmm.
approach it. Even when
Mhm.
you're going through it yourself, you're like, this is such a mystery, and it's so
Yeah.
overwhelming.
So it
E
doesn't feel real, kind of.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
so strange.
Yeah.
It's so strange. And I think, I mean, that's not to say, it's overwhelming, but different people grieve very differently. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
we talk
Mm-hmm.
about that too. So it's not, I'm not trying to highlight one particular manifestation of it, but it just is, it's like, it's the strangest, heaviest, but also like a very profound thing,
Mm-hmm.
brings to light, like the love you share with this
Mm.
person. Anyways, so it's kind of around me in my life right now, and it's sort of come up. We a guest of ours, Uncle Leon, we mentioned in an earlier episode, he recently passed, and that's been very, yeah, just a reality in my life and in the lives of people that I love very much, but others that I know as well. So we wanted to kind of just talk about it in a very kind of gentle and
Mm-hmm.
reverent way,
Mhm.
to think about what it means to grieve, to think about what it means to hope and grief.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we start like by sharing some of our own experiences grieving the loss of loved ones. Maybe Erin, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I think like there's like the first person that I really lost was my grandfather, but I was like very young. So
Mhm.
it was not, and we didn't really live close to them at any
Yeah.
point. So I loved him a lot, but I didn't really like know him
Mhm.
super well.
Sure.
But then when my grandmother died, I had been like living in Ottawa. I had been like with her. We
Mm.
lived around the corner from her, and
Right.
she was just such a beautiful woman, and she was totally the matriarch of the family, and was, and she had this beautiful death, like such a beautiful death. I think I shared about it
Mm.
on one of our other episodes, but it was, I just remember like driving home from the wake, um, and like with my mom, and it was just like my mom and I in the car,
Yeah.
because I had stayed there with her and everybody else had gone, because she was kind of the one who arranged everything, so she was like doing all the stuff. And that's
Yeah.
like definitely a part of, the complication sometimes of grief, is like, especially people who are close to the person who've died, like a lot of
Yeah.
times they're just so overwhelmed or like burdened by
Right.
the actual planning of things,
Yeah. There's so
that
much.
it's like,
Yeah.
and even just the amount of people around, that it's like there's not really a chance to, like, it's kind of like you say, like it's not real, like it feels
Yeah.
like you're in this like weird space. But I
Mhm.
just remember like driving with my mom, and at one point like just watching her while like part of that grief just hit her, like
Yeah.
losing her mom,
Mhm.
and like seeing it exactly play out, because she was there when she died, like
Right.
Mm.
she saw this beautiful death. She knew, like, my grandmother had such a beautiful faith, like
Mm.
none of us had any doubt that she is, I mean, maybe she had a stop in purgatory, it's possible, but like, but that she was with the Lord, especially because she
Mhm.
loved Our Lady so much and prayed her rosary all the time. And, so like, so it was like, like it was one of those things where it was such a grace to know that, like
Mhm.
to have a certainty
Yeah.
of that. Um, and then, but then seeing my mom, like like grieving the loss of her mother was really difficult. Like it was just, you know, heartbreaking because there's nothing that you can do. Like it's
Yeah.
like you would love to even just have a second with them, like just to hug them, or you know, and she had just like touched her body for the last time because it was the close of the wake, and then they were closing the coffin, and then that's it until the funeral the next day, you know.
Yeah.
So like even the things like that that are so difficult. And then it's interesting because then we had a close family friend pass away who last year, almost 2 years ago now, year and a half. Anyways, but then it's like this whole different experience of grief because he was very estranged from any kind of faith. And had like totally rejected things. So then there's kind of like this added like question of like, please, Lord, have mercy on his soul. Like the hope that I mean, the reasons that he was estranged from the church, like that the Lord would have mercy on him and would, you know, see the depths of his heart and all of those kind of things. But that was actually the hardest part for me, was like I can offer things for him. I can offer mass for him. I can, you know, offer sacrifices for him. I can offer my divine mercy, like indulgence, like I can offer that for him and all of those kind of things. But it's like there's a like even an additional part to grief of like having to entrust him to God's mercy.
Yeah.
When I don't know what the state of his soul was, you know, but hoping, still being able to hope in that he's with the Lord, you know. Yeah. Anyway, so just started off in a good just right in there.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
But that is the nature of this. And part of me is wondering, like, I don't know where the Lord is going to take this episode in terms of like whose heart is going to hear this or whose heart needs to hear this. Because, you know, that's one of the things, like you just said, when someone is grieving, maybe this is going to be for people who are friends of people who are grieving, because when someone is grieving, it is really hard to know, like, what is it that's comforting? What is it that, how do I love you well in this moment? And, you know, and it's beautiful that you were there with your mom, for example. Like, I think that, you know, just being there, because she might not have tracked in that moment of driving while she was in the car that you were there. But it's almost like if you had not been there, you know, it would have, your absence would have been very felt, I imagine, you know, in that moment. Whereas your presence enabled her to process what she needed to process in that moment. And so it's just so mysterious to me, because it is so like, and it just points to me to the beauty of relationship, like what it really means to be created like God, to be able to love, you know, because it's like, that's really what we're called to. And when we experience grief, I think it just shows us what it is, this gift of communion that we have with one another, how real it is. Like, it's not just a sum of like, I do these things for you, or I talk to you sometimes. It's like, there is a relationship, there's a reality to the love that we share that is so profound and like solid, you know, that really, like, even when I'm not physically with you in the same room, your presence here on earth is something that impacts my life. And like, I don't know, it points to so many aspects of what it means to be given this gift of our existence, and like to be with one another, you know. So it's just so,
it's like strange too. Like, it's even strange how we can find that, because even at so this is my grandmother's wake at the same thing. So all my cousins are there. We have this great big, you know, Irish Catholic family. And we would all just periodically take breaks from the wake to go out to the parking lot to drink beer out of my cousin's trunk, like, and share stories about my grandma, and like laugh and cry and like it's like up and down. Like 1 minute you're like crying because you miss, and then the next you're just like laughing because there's this funny story, and it's you know, like, because they're like brought so many people together, and then you're like ridiculous because you're drinking beer out of a trunk in a parking lot, you know. But it was like, but there's something so beautiful about that too, you know.
I remember my dad's dad passed away when he was like so my grandfather passed away when he was in his mid-50s, so pretty
Mm.
young. And my dad tells a story that, after his funeral, all the family, and my dad's one of 13 kids, so they came back for the funeral. My dad also has a brother who died pretty young. I don't remember if that was before or after his father, but anyway, so the family was all there, and inevitably my dad's family start telling stories and start telling jokes, and so they were just laughing together. And then at one point it got kind of quiet, and one of the brothers kind of piped up and was like, is this we just had his funeral, like, is this okay, and like they're all kind of like it, like I think all sort of occurred to them at the same time. And then no, one of the other brothers was like, no, like this is what dad would have wanted, and so it just that feeling of, but I can also remember being at the funeral of my friend's grandfather, and who I didn't know but went because it's my friend's grandpa. And afterwards, I was there, and some other friends. I was probably like, gosh, I don't know, 15, something like that. And we started chatting and laughing and kind of thing. And then my friend whose grandfather died was kind of quiet, and she's like, you guys, I just feel like this doesn't make sense, that we're just like being normal, but this is my grandpa's funeral,
Yeah.
And so for her, it didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, right? There's no like for every person, grief is different. And I think that's part of the challenge or the opportunity of when we're adjacent to people who are grieving, is that it is this like opportunity, in the sense that they talk about it when there's something difficult. Let's look at this as an opportunity. But it's an opportunity to think, okay, how can I be really tune into this person and be sensitive to them and what they need right now, in wherever they might be in this kind of process.
I have an experience of that where one of my grandmothers passed away when I was in law school, and she just has she had a really big personality. Like, she's just kind of a larger than life person. And she was very sick. So when she died, it wasn't a shock. Like, we knew it was coming for days, but the shock was like, oh my gosh, she died. Like, it just was sort of like, I can't believe that's true. And it was just and she's just one of those people that, you kind of think like she sort of will live forever on this earth. Like, you know what I mean? It was kind of that kind of personality. So I was kind of surprised by my own shock, and like the grief was very, like, I was just kind of very quickly sort of grieving. So I think partially because it was so shocking. And my roommates at the time, like one of my roommates, a very good friend of mine, and I just kind of sensed that, like, my other roommates, they were lovely, very loving, but like removed, from the situation. Very, very, very kind to me, but removed. And one of my friends, I really felt her like enter in with me, and she really came into the sort of the bubble of grief that I was living. And she prayed the divine mercy thing, like, because I found out my grandma died. I told my roommates, and I was in shock. And most of them were like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, and very sweet, like I said. But she's someone who experienced a lot of loss. I think she just knew what to do. And she just entered into it with me and prayed with me. And that's exactly what I needed. I needed to do something. And then I went home very quickly, because a lot of times when you're grieving, you do want to be with people who know the person that you're grieving. Because you're like, and you get it, and you know them. And, so but yeah, it is tricky. And I think you're right, Nicole. Like, I really appreciated that. My friend's presence, I didn't feel alone, and I really needed to not feel alone, which I didn't even really know. I really needed to know that I was loved by someone in that moment. And yeah, I'm thinking about, in terms of in my experience, I've had a few different experiences, but the one that's probably most defining for me is, I might have shared this before, but I lost a friend in high school, and we weren't in the same city. We were very, very good friends, but we lived in different cities, and she was ill from different things, but nothing terminal. And she had to have this procedure, and she just died on the operating table. And it was very and I was very young. Our birthdays are days away. And so she would have been 18 in like a few days. And it was like a very defining moment in my life, where I was like, oh my goodness. And I remember that experience of grief was, just sort of like, what is this? Like, what do you like? what do you
Yeah.
mean? Like, and then um at her funeral, just like it was very strange. It was very strange. Death is very strange.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That's very strange. And like you said, Erin, your grandma had a beautiful, and that's what we all pray for. We pray for a beautiful death, for a peaceful death. But it's a very strange thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that. And then I remember it's been years, obviously, since she passed because we were 18 at the time. But that experience of grief returns because I always think of her, like whenever I have milestone experiences, I always think of her. And obviously in our faith, I don't think of her as like, she's gone, but I think like, Lord, like I pray for her and I think, okay, like her life ended and my life continues, but her life didn't end. It went, it can hopefully continues in heaven. And that's another thing. I don't know where she was at in her faith at the time when she died, but I have so much hope. I really do.
Yeah.
I feel like God has really taught me to hope in that,
Mhm.
big time for her. And so I have a very optimistic hope for her that I will see her in heaven, but I always think, yeah, like I always think it is a gift God gave me this extra time, this more. I almost feel like my time is extra, it's so strange.
Mm.
Like these are very defining moments. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, like she died. I could like, I mean, couldn't have been me, but when I was young, I was like, oh, well, it could have been
Yeah.
me. It could be me. And so it gave me the sense of like all the time that I have is extra, like all the time that I
Mm.
have, or the better way of maybe putting it is like all the time that I have is a gift. It really
Yeah.
is a gift,
Yeah.
which is a different kind of dimension of grief. It's kind of an odd thing to characterize that as a grief thing. But I wouldn't have that in the way that I do have it without the grief that I experienced and losing
Right.
her, so it's like a strange gift from that grief that
Mm.
I've got. Yeah. But one of the
Mhm.
things I was thinking of is, how do we carry this reality of um the fact that people die, like I
Mhm.
like experiencing loss. I think for me, one of the temptations can be, and this is much far removed, like this is after sort of you've grieved somebody for a long time and it's not sort of immediate. It's not your immediate experience, but it makes me afraid sometimes to love, right? Like it's
Yeah.
really painful to lose people. And I know that they go to heaven. So this obviously plays in the fact that people go to heaven, the fact that Jesus is with us, the communion of saints, the
Mhm.
hope that we have plays into this question. But I just want to hear from you. Like, I wanted to get your feedback on this because sometimes for me, I'm just like, whoa, I am so afraid of
Mm.
Mm.
not of dying, but of grieving.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm
Mhm.
afraid it's
Yeah.
a really, really intense
Mhm.
thing to
Mhm.
grieve someone's death. And
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Like, how do
Yeah.
we
I think about it a lot actually because my parents are getting older now. Like I'm
Yeah.
the oldest of the three of us plus our secret prayer warrior. And like my parents are in their 60s and 70s. And so they're getting older and you can like see the getting olderness that
Yeah.
happens in your parents as they,
Yeah.
as they start to complain about technology more and as well, like in the funny ways and in the practical ways too, right? Like
Yeah.
thinking about like I've had conversations about them where like I'm going to be their power of personal care and their power
Yeah.
of attorney.
Mhm.
So this is actually a good like have those conversations with your
Yeah.
parents or the people who are
Yeah.
it's because my mom she's worked in long-term care for a long time and has seen just devastating situations where
Mm.
that hadn't been determined with families or they'd never talked
Yeah.
Right.
about like what they wanted when they like if they become incapacitated. Do you want to be on a ventilator? Do you want to have like any extraordinary measures? Do you like what do you
Hmm.
want? And and I feel actually very grateful to have had those conversations with my parents
Mm.
because like my mom wants no extraordinary measures and my dad wants every extraordinary measure. Like
Yeah.
it's so funny,
Yeah.
and even like the things like they'll say like things that they want for their funeral or
Right.
or and then
Yeah.
hearing them say so like even having those conversations and hearing them say like hearing my mom say like I would be like peaceful to go whenever I go. I've had a good life. And like it's not like she's given up on life, like
Yeah.
but just to have that, like to be able to hear that from
Like
my mom and to be able
contentedness kind of.
yeah, and to like talk about those things with them has
Mm.
been a real gift, because it for me has taken away some of that like fear of all the unknown, because part of that has to do with like practical things of
Yeah.
like even seeing my mom dealing with everything when my grandma died, and then like knowing, having to figure out, and she knew kind of what my grandma wanted and things like that, but and then the experience for me of like moving back home. So if you're a new listener, I have fibromyalgia, so I live with my parents because it's really helpful for me to have some help with basic things. And so the experience of like being back with them has been good because it's put into the spotlight. Like I only have a limited time with them left. And I really like, I'm definitely imperfect in it still, but like it's actually been a good motivator to really like treasure this time, like to take advantage of this time. And I kind of have the thought frequently of like, Lord, help me to make the most of this time so that when they're gone, I'll know that I've lived this time with them well,
Like
you know?
fully. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's really beautiful.
That is
Yeah.
I like
beautiful.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've been through just the two experiences that I'm thinking of are, so my mom had an illness about 10 years ago. When
Oh yeah, if you wanted to hear about it, it was
That's right.
our first episode.
First or second episode.
Second episode. I
Second
think, yeah.
episode, yeah.
Yeah, second
Yes,
episode.
second episode that we ever did. And it's
So
it's
you can hear the whole
beautiful,
story
beautiful.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's beautiful. But talk about anticipatory grief being a thing, right? Where you
right.
can, as you anticipate that you're going to lose someone, or that you
Mhm.
may lose someone,
Yeah.
you start going through all the stages of grief, right? And those, I'm sure most of us know those because they're pretty present in pop culture too, but like denial, anger, bargaining, what are they all?
There's a great, which is
acceptance
funny.
eventually.
Have you guys seen that
Forgetting
giraffe animation with the stages of grief? There's
No.
old cartoon on YouTube. I gotta find it. Maybe we can
That's
put it in the show
amazing.
notes.
That'd be
Like
so
this,
fun.
it's from ages ago of like this giraffe who's sinking in this pit of quicksand and goes through all the stages of grief as he sinks
Oh,
into this
gosh.
pit of
That's
quicksand.
hilarious.
And then it's like the joke of it, which I'll give away, is that he's a giraffe, so he actually hits the bottom before his head goes in. So he's just like stuck.
He goes through all the stages, but then
Yeah. But it is it's good. It's worth seeing. Anyways, moving on.
That's
Sorry.
funny.
Yeah.
Well, and then of course people go through the stages now, and not now, but like always have in different orders, and you might go.
Yeah.
They're not stages like little nice neat steps.
Yeah.
It's just
It's not
like this
linear.
messy,
It's not
complicated process. But I went through. I can look back at my experience of my mom being sick, and this is went on for a few years, and there was a time where she had like surgery. There was times where she was in and out of the hospital for months at a time. And there was a good chunk of time where we didn't know what was happening. Doctors didn't know what was happening, and she was essentially seemed like she was dying.
Yeah.
And we thought we were preparing ourselves that we could lose her within the year. And so yeah, gosh, even just saying that just kind of like brings me back to that. I looked at, my dad, I think, went through these stages in a way where he could come to a place of acceptance.
Yeah.
So he would share that with us. And I think she said this on the podcast too, where he was just like, he doesn't want to lose my mom. He doesn't want to lose his wife, but that he just has to like basically trust in the goodness of God. And know that whatever happens, like God is still good, because he can look at his own life and see all the ways that God has worked. And so that was kind of like a kind of acceptance, like of, well, then the God's will be done kind of thing. Whatever happens, God, you are good.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever went beyond like a denial.
Right.
And for me, this looked like, because the thought of losing my mom, and it still brings a tear to my eyes. Like I couldn't handle that thought. It was too overwhelming for me. And I remember just praying like, oh, didn't expect this, but sorry. sorry, not sorry for tears. I remember like having a prayer time once with the Lord and just saying, Lord, like I'm just gonna trust that you're gonna heal her. Is that okay? Is that okay if I just keep believing that she's gonna get better? Because I feel like that's all I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord in his gentleness, I felt like was just like, yeah, that's okay. Like that's
Yeah.
And so, and thank the Lord, she got better. And maybe the Lord would have given me the grace to actually go through whatever I needed to go through if she was going to pass away at that time. But yeah, it's just, I think that was telling for me. I learned about myself in that, where I'm like, ooh, this is hard. And there's other people that I've lost, but just even now for me as a like a married person, and sometimes the thought of like losing Nathan, like what if, and so Nathan and I were actually talking about this the other day, and once in a while it's like the fear of that will hit me, like what if I lost him, and I'm just like, I don't even know, I can't even think about that, like I just cannot handle that thought, And I was saying that to him, and then he kind of said, yeah, he's like, I think about that every day, like what if I lost you? And then I just thank God that you're in my life. And and so he's I don't know, he just processes it differently than me. He's able to be more at peace with that idea, but it also, in that he allows himself to think of it every day. Where me, it's like I block that thought out, and then only when it comes in, I'm like, I don't want to think about this. Go away thought. So I much prefer the denial. So I think that's going to be just something that I'm going to learn and grow when I lose someone who's really close to me. But it's and maybe I'll share after one story about someone that I did lose. But yeah, it's I don't even remember exactly what your question was, Rachel.
No, yeah, I was just kind of like a prompt. I was just curious about like, because I can sometimes be afraid. I'm just afraid sometimes of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to grieve. But it's so dumb because like that's like, what does that mean, Rachel? Like, what do you mean you don't want to grieve?
But because we know. I don't think it's dumb to be afraid to. That's exactly what I'm afraid to grieve, because I feel like I'm just gonna. It's gonna. I'm afraid I won't survive it.
Which is so funny too, because it's like, because then thinking back to the experiences where we have grieved, like I can think about those, and I'm like, oh, it didn't destroy me because actually my body has built-in mechanisms. But it's like, so we don't trust those things sometimes, or we don't trust them
because if we haven't.
Well, like, I think I don't know. It's a grace. Yeah, I think you're onto something, Nicole, in that like it is a grace. Like there is no way that we wouldn't actually. I don't know if I would get if I would have survived, because if without the Lord, some of the things, and I don't know. And that's the thing, when I look at the people right now in my life, as we're having all these conversations, I'm just thinking, reflecting on all these people I know who are living this now, and who, I feel the way you felt about your mom, Erin. Like I there's nothing I can do to actually make this actually better in a certain sense. But then I think, no, there is one thing for sure that I can do, which is pray for you, which is love you and pray for you. Even if I can't love you, if I'm not there in person, I can pray for you, because the one person who knows this experience thoroughly and knows us thoroughly is the Lord. And he is present both to the one who has lost and the one who has moved on and is him, and so it's like, there is a grace for us in this experience, and it is a mystery. It is a mysterious grace, and it's not one of those things where you're like, well, like you said, Nicole, it's not like, well, these are the steps and these are the things and it's not like that. It's like it's a grace. It's a grace that just comes because blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Like the Lord knows. He knows.
The Lord is near to the brokenhearted.
And it's also
all these scriptures about that.
There totally is. There totally is, for sure. And I think it's also okay, like, because I feel like I've talked to some people who also have had the experience of like feeling like they were in grief and feeling like the Lord was totally absent from right? Like, and, and which is also like a hard thing. And it totally makes me think actually about Salve Dolores, like where John Paul II writes about the experience of like suffering itself, but I think it's like very applicable for grief. there's something about communal, like the communal aspect of it, like
Yes.
of the
Mm.
sharing the experience with those who are sharing the experience. So like exactly like you
Yeah.
say, gathering of family and friends who knew the person, all those kind of things. But there's also something that's inherent to suffering that he calls suffering in dispersion, which
Mm.
is that because each of us is a unique person, and because even especially because each of us has a unique relationship with the person who died, that there's
Yeah.
something untouchable about our grief that
Yeah.
can't be shared with another person in the fullness of
Into
its death,
totality.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that even if there
Yeah.
exists some commonality there,
Yes.
and I think all of us experience like the Lord differently, because it's like the
Yeah,
cross, like that's
totally.
exactly where you're at that point, is like the place of death, like
Yeah. Yeah.
the pivotal point between like death and resurrection. It's like being there, and that experience of
Mhm.
being at the cross is like so unique to every single person, which is part of the paradox of grief, of like when we can't understand what other people are doing or what we're experiencing, or
Yeah.
like it's it
Yeah.
can be so confusing.
That's
Mhm.
so, thank you for saying that. I think that's so important because, yeah, as we were having this conversation, I was thinking there's so many people. I mean, we're talking about a lot of different things that are not always
Yeah.
applicable to everybody. And, and this could be a very triggering episode, to some people. And I hate that word. It's like, I feel like it's so overused, but
Yeah.
I do mean it in this context where I'm like, this really could be something that someone
It
can't
can
listen
bring
to.
up the feelings, as it is
100%.
for
Yeah,
us.
the grief. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as it is for us, exactly. And it may not be life-giving. Like, it's hard to know what's going to be life-giving and what's not. And sometimes, like you said, Erin, like the Lord, you don't even feel the presence of the Lord. Like you don't feel that comfort. You don't feel that
Yeah.
consolation. And I don't know why he allows it, but for me, as someone outside of that, watching someone living these things, I'm just thinking like, okay, all I can do really is, be here, be present, show
Mhm.
up in a way,
Mhm.
and then just keep in my heart, in my soul, just keep offering this person back to Jesus, like the grieving friend that I have, the grieving family member that I
Mhm.
have, and the soul of the one they love. Like just keep making that offering because it's so beyond me, it's
Mhm.
so beyond me, but it's not beyond the Lord. It is not beyond him. And to have, for me, it is a challenge in some ways in these moments, watching people suffer,
Mhm.
to make that act of trust and be like, no, Lord, you really do love this person. You really do love their loved one. You really do. It can be challenging, but that's what I keep coming back to. Like, no, that is my saving grace. Like that is the only thing I can hang my hat on as the realest, most solid thing that I can live out of as a person who loves people who are grieving,
Mhm.
because but then it's so true, because I guess if you are that person, if you are me, if you're like watching others grieve or with others who are grieving, it's so important not to then take that conviction, if you have that conviction, and like put it on to someone else's experience of grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They may not be experiencing the Lord, or they may be really angry with him, or they may be just can't even think about anything to do with
Mhm.
anything, like that
Yeah.
right now.
I think it's we had an episode harkening back to our first first year of
It's such a teacher. I love it.
there we go.
Professor
But I think we
McCall.
were both in our first semester of episodes. So anyways.
Yes.
But on what not to say.
Oh, yes.
Remember that one?
Mhm.
But I think that is really applicable in grief, especially that when people talk about being hurt by others when they're grieving, it's often just by people trying to say the right thing, when the right thing to say is often nothing, and just like be present. Like I heard one story about a couple who went through a really awful traumatic thing, losing a child in a traumatic way, and they said that there was a lot of church people who said a lot of hurtful things about, oh well, at least she's in heaven now, or at least da 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 da, or trying to kind of say nice things. And they said the ones who they really felt loved by were the people who kind of showed up awkwardly with a casserole and like didn't know what to say and didn't really say anything, but just wanted to show that they cared and just kind
like,
of were there.
Yeah.
That those are the people who actually made them feel like loved and supported during that time.
Yeah.
And I think that is key. Like, but I think it's hard if you're also a person who's grieving, and maybe some of us grieve in a way that it's actually really helpful to repeat those messages of hope, of some hope back to ourselves, right? And that's great. But to remember that what is helpful for me as I'm grieving is not necessarily what's helpful for the person next to me who's lost the same person but has a different relationship with them and is just a different person. So it's just
Yeah, it makes me think of like the levels of, because I remember in like pastoral theology class, like one of the things that we were talking about was how you would speak with somebody who's just lost a loved one and who's coming in or whatever. And one of the guys, I remember he was very insistent about like needing to share with the person that they should have a mass offered for their loved one as soon as possible. And the professor being like, no, like that's actually, especially because if you don't know where the faith is at of that person, and it's bringing up like, especially if it's a family who hasn't been practicing, like then it's bringing up questions about like, well, why would you need to have a mass said, or like what, like purgatory and all, like just things that the person doesn't actually need to hear, or that are not going to be helpful for them in that moment. But the thing I will always remember from that class, I might have shared on the podcast before, but like levels of response. So like for these parents who lost a little child, then a level 1 response would be something like, well, at least you have other kids that you can like, which is just like, I feel like no good sentence in responding to somebody pastorally starts with at least. Like we can just wipe that out of our vocabulary. Right. But it's like you're trying to say something, but essentially what you're doing is just passing off the pain, like trying to like put a stopper in that person's pain so that it doesn't splatter all over you. Right. And then, so like a level 2 response would be to at least acknowledge it and say, I'm so sorry for your loss, which is like all of us can do that. Like, I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this. Like, I'm so sorry for your loss. A level 3 response, level 1, 2, and 3 response. So level 3 response would be to be like listening to the person's experience and like hearing kind of what they're saying. And so then maybe a level 3 response could be kind of like, I'm so sorry for your loss. It sounds like you have such a beautiful motherly heart, and I'm so sorry that your motherly heart is missing your little one right now. Like something like, right? Do you see like,
but or even just how are you doing?
Even something like that, but something that shows that like
empathetic
you're
understanding
listening,
or something.
that you're listening to what they're saying, right?
I think that for me, one of the things that's just been super helpful is just to be humble, like, and just be like, you know what?
I don't know what
that's
to
been
say.
like the most helpful thing. And just say that to the person, like, look, I'm not that you're trying to look for them to give you direction, but just like very, very like sincerely, just like be sincere and be like, I want to love you right now. I really do love you. I really don't know what to say. And that's how I feel. Like, I think it's just true. Just be, and this is kind of like what that couple was saying, like, just be humble in your awkwardness and whatever, but don't abandon the people who are grieving. Like, don't be afraid of them, of their grief, you know, like, and maybe they're going to tell you to bugger off because they really don't want to look at your face right now. And it's like really not what's helping them, you know? And honestly, that's a totally fair thing to say to me if you are dealing with this. Like, it's not, because it's not personal. It's just like, I think just having the humility to be able to receive, like you said, Erin, I think you're hinting at, Nicole, too, like just receiving each other in that place where we actually are. If the person's angry, if the person's sad, whatever it is, and just being like, I don't even know what to say right now or how to respond. And I'm so sorry if anything that I'm saying is making this harder. I just want you to know that I love you. Like, you know, it's just like, because I think real relationship, and that I think is what can happen often, is when we're grieving, there's so much activity, there's so much going on, and then everything like dies out and everything goes away. And it's like, okay, the people who really love you, when everything quiets down and it hits you like it did for your mom, Erin, you know, that's when we just need to be with, and we need others. We just need others to be with us, I think, you know? And my thing is, like, right now, some of the people I know who are grieving are not anywhere near me. So the way I can be with is I can pray. Like, that's the way I can be with. But I think there is a responsibility as church that we have to one another as the body of Christ, as family, basically, ultimately, as one another's family, to be with,
Oh,
you
I
know?
I just had this memory of like for one of my classes we needed to go to a like a synagogue and to have to like experience something there, and
Mm.
it was so powerful because each week they have anybody in the synagogue who's lost somebody
Mhm.
and who needs anything like food or it's just who's lost somebody, they ask them to stand and so the people can stand, and then there's like instruction
Mm.
from the rabbi of like, so these are the people that we need to care for right now,
Oh,
but there's
it's
like
really
this
beautiful.
public recognition, yeah, of like it's just normal that
Yeah.
like if you've lost somebody, then
For your
your
community to
community
know.
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
know, yeah, to know and
Yeah.
to be able
Hmm.
to like care for you in that time, you know,
Yeah.
which is really beautiful. Like I remember just sitting in the back and just being like having like tears, like
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's so
Wow.
lovely.
Right.
Yeah, which should be normal, you know, but I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
sometimes it's because we get uncomfortable with things exactly like you say, when we don't know what to say or we don't know what to do, or
Mhm.
even like if we are grieving and then it's like we feel like sometimes like we put these expectations on ourselves to like make other people feel good or make other
Mhm.
people comfortable with our pain, or like to shove our pain down because we don't
Yeah.
want to make other people have to deal with it, or you know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, like all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
um can I bring up a sort of a different thing related to basically grief and losing someone?
Yeah.
Please do.
There's a prayer. I was just reading this the
Oh,
ladies
yeah.
beforehand. I think I'll share it now. There's a prayer in this is a Byzantine book called the Public. My Zoom is not letting me show it, but
There
anyways,
you
it's
go.
called it's called the Publican's Prayer Book, and it's all these like Byzantine prayers for various things, and there's a bunch of prayers for the dead, or prayers to be said by those who are grieving or by the church. So there's this one. It's called Akathist, and I might be pronouncing these things wrong, you guys. I'm still getting used to Byzantine stuff. So Akathist hymn for those who have fallen asleep, and you just like pray this series of hymns and prayers. But so my husband and I were praying this for someone, a relative of someone at our church who had passed away a few weeks ago, and I was just really struck by some of the beauty of the prayers. But there was one, and I can't find all the ones that I was thinking of, but there's one I'll read. This is the 10th Kontakion. Shedding silent tears at the graves of our relatives, we pray with hope and cry expectantly. Tell us, O Lord, that their sins are forgiven, and give our spirit a secret assurance of it, that we may sing Alleluia. And there's other little prayers that talk about saying, it's just these normal, like sort of talk about, oh yes, when the souls of those who have departed visit us, or things like that. And I can think of and I feel, I don't know, I just feel like maybe it's just me, but I feel like that's not something that's talked about as a normal thing very much.
Right. Yeah.
Of the fact that we can continue to have these relationships with
Yeah.
with our loved ones who have died, not like in a weird way, or like I'm not talking about like seances and
Yeah,
whatever
Yeah.
stuff,
yeah.
but like
Just in reality.
yeah, and like my can I tell two stories real quick? So my uncle who passed away, he was like in his 30s, and he died like in a snowmobile accident, and this is years and years and years ago, long before I was born. But I think the story is one of my grandmother, like his mother, or maybe one of the sisters, like had a dream about him shortly, like a while after he died, that he was in pain, and he was like troubled and kind of crying and like suffering, and she was praying for him, praying for his soul. And then like a couple years later, she had a dream that he was happy and like at peace. And so for her, this was like a thing of, okay, he's in heaven now. He's gone through purgatory. And then my other story is, so I lost my she was like a grandmother to me. Her name is Jean Rubel, and she was this wonderful Ukrainian lady in Winnipeg who she had never married, so she just like adopted herself into different families and became like our grandmother in many ways, like an extra grandmother. So I had known her my whole life, and she was at all the birthday parties and Christmas and everything. And so she died in 2018, and I was able to fly home. I was doing grad school in Toronto at the time, but I was able to fly back to Winnipeg for her funeral. There was just like a couple interesting things that happened related to this kind of like, I don't know, these like interesting experiences with someone who has died, right?
Yeah.
At the prayers, before the funeral, I remember looking at her body, and it just struck me of like, oh, this is not her anymore. Like, this is like a thing. And then, as you know, after I kind of was thinking about that, and I was helping lead music with my parents, it was almost as if all of a sudden Jean, like the actual Jean, the spirit of Gisole, her, like came and had a conversation with me. Like I had this like conversation with her in my mind afterward, and it was a very meaningful conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, was that real? Like, what was that?
Right.
You know? But then something else happened, and it was, so Jean, whenever she'd say bye to people, she would always end with, God love ya. That's how she like said bye and hung up the phone or whatever. Or when she was leaving someone's house, okay, God love you, which is not like a super common phrase, right? I don't know a lot of people, but that was like her thing. And she also really loved my violin playing. So I would, I used to play in praise and worship bands and different things like that, and do fiddle stuff. And she just loved it. She thought it was the best. So she was like my number one fan, And so I remember flying back to Toronto, and going through the airport. I was carrying my violin because I'd brought it to Winnipeg, so to play it at her at the prayers before the funeral. And I went and was waiting for the bus, and there was this lady who came, who was like walking by in this like pedestrian crosswalk thingy. And it was so funny. She was like wearing like a, like a construction vest, kind of the reflective material stuff. And she had like curly hair. She was like, looked like, this is going to sound terrible, but the look of somebody who's like in their 50s as a lifelong smoker kind of thing.
Yes.
Like that's what she looked like.
Sure.
And had the voice for that. But this is what she said. She looked at me and she was like, oh, you have a violin. God love ya.
Whoa. Yeah.
And I was just like taken aback, because I was just like, in my mind, I was like, Jean?
Oh my gosh, am I totally wrong about reincarnation? Is it?
What's happening right now? Yeah. But it was just, it felt like this little like nudge from her. And she's also a very funny lady, where I'm like, she would do something like that. Like she would tell Jesus, could you just arrange this for, like, can I just, So it's interesting. So I think, I don't know. I think that there are ways, I guess my point is like, I think sometimes, as Catholics, we can be, there is maybe a subsection of Catholics who maybe have a similar experience of me, in that we're afraid of weird spiritual stuff because we don't want to do anything that is anywhere near anything sort of occulty, because we've been warned about that and it feels scary or whatever. And then we have these experiences where it feels like someone who has died has connected with us or communicated with us, and we're not quite sure what to do with that. So I just, this is my long way of saying, I think that there is, I love these Byzantine prayers because it references that. It references asking the Lord. So, hey, Lord, can you
give me a sign, like help me to see. Give me a sign,
and that's okay. And we can have that. Like, totally. I think that's part of the hope that we're allowed to have. And as much as all the grief is real too, right? But
and it's beautiful, like for years after, it's like our loved one can, like, it's like this connection with them, and this really like a real experience of the communion of the saints. That's real. Totally, I smelled my grandmother's perfume in an elevator one day. Was it my grandmother in the elevator? Probably not, but it was probably some other old lady who lived in the big building that I lived in, who has the same, but then but then it was just like, but it was like in the smelling, she was there, you know,
Yeah.
like, and in this, like, it's like when we talk about memory
Mm-hmm.
in the mass, for example, right? It's like,
Yeah.
do this in remembrance of me. Doesn't just mean like, think about Jesus and what he did. Like, there's a real being that's happening there in that, like,
Yeah.
there's a substance to it. And I feel like the same can be like, my grandfather used to find dimes everywhere. So that's totally his thing with
Cute.
my mom. Like, she'll just find dimes in random places, and it'll be like her dad is like right there with her in that moment, you know, which is beautiful, which is
It is
beautiful.
beautiful. And
Yeah.
I don't like it. I'm like, I mean, this is just me, but you know, in movies when they sentimentalize it, they're like, well, your
Yeah.
loved one's alive in your heart. And I'm like, no,
And they
not.
have wings,
That's
and
true.
now
Yes,
they're
yeah.
an angel. No, they are not an
Yeah, they're
angel.
not. I want them to be really alive. I don't want them just to be kind of like
Yeah.
kind of alive in my heart. Like I want
Yeah.
them to actually like be alive
Yeah.
themselves. And then they
Yeah.
are. I mean, that's the hope of our faith. Like
Mhm.
they are alive in the Lord. They really are. You know, and like, yeah, I mean, I think for me, when my grandmother died, it was the Eucharist, like realizing that like if Nana's in heaven with Jesus, I'm with Jesus right now. It's like we're kind of together right now, you know?
Yeah,
So there's and
totally.
it's actually true. And it's just
Mhm.
like that's the reality of the community of the saints, and it's so beautiful.
Mhm.
And at whatever point God allows us to have the grace to experience that, you know, in our hearts with respect to someone we've lost, it's oh my gosh, it's such a gift. Like it's
Yeah.
such a gift because it's
Totally.
true, you know?
Yeah.
So anyways, this has been
Yeah.
kind of a roller coaster of an episode. We've gone up and down a whole bunch.
See, which is
There's
totally
been
appropriate to the experience of
Of
grief.
grief.
So
Yeah, a little
know.
messy, not really linear.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Yeah.
But also
kinda-
I just want to say, like, yeah, I'm just praying very much right now for many people I know who are grieving. So if one of our listeners is going through that right now,
Yeah, we're
know that
praying
you're
for
in my
you.
prayers. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So we love you. We're praying for
Yeah.
you.
We were with you.
So
with you.
yeah, who's got the God wink? We can close out with
It's me.
Go
Yeah.
I
for it.
have a God wink.
Okay. let's hear it.
Okay, so I am part of this little ladies kind of faith study group. I graciously was invited to join by a friend who's in the group a few months ago. And so we've been studying a couple books. So shout out to the ladies in the Stein Society here in Nashville.
Yeah.
So we're studying right now. We're going through the book I Believe in Love by
Mhm.
Father Jean-C Elbé.
Mhm.
Which I think I've probably mentioned on the podcast before. But anyway, so it's all about Saint Therese of Lisieux and her approach of like confidence in the love of Jesus.
Mhm.
And so I noticed. So, anyways, so this has just been coming up for me more of just like this concept of just like totally like just the little way of Saint Therese, right?
Yeah.
And confidence and abandonment and all these kind of things. And then today I was noticing that the Abiding Together podcast. Or as my husband likes to call it, the Catholic Ladies Talking Podcast.
Awesome.
So anyway, I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, it's on Saint Therese on confidence in the love of Jesus. What is this? And it turns out that Pope Francis just put out a document on Saint Therese and on her like doctrine of like or I don't know if doctrine is the right word, but anyways, whatever it is, of like confidence, the little way, and like confidence in the love of Jesus and abandonment and all that kind of stuff. So they're talking about it. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're doing this book study. Pope Francis has written this thing, you know.
Maybe the Lord is telling me something.
I'm like, okay, you know. So it was like the little God wink of like, all right, Saint Therese, like you're popping up everywhere, you know.
And for our American listeners, just in case you're not sure who we're talking about, it's Saint Therese of Lisieux.
Right.
That's really her name.
Sorry. I don't mean to.
Saint Therese.
Lisieux.
Saint Therese.
Lisieux. I know.
Your pronunciation.
And then there's someone
so
from like France that's like, that's not how you
right. Yeah, exactly. Like listen to Canadian French and like you're butchering it, and we listen to Americans and we're like you're butchering it. So sorry everyone. Right. We'll just apologize. Canadians, we'll just apologize.
Like, I don't care how you say it. Just love Jesus and have confidence in him.
Yeah. That's right.
Is that your Saint Therese voice? That's hilarious. That sounded like one of those little kid cartoons of saints, you know, where they're like,
totally.
I wasn't sure what was happening for a minute, and then I realized
that's how I pictured Saint Therese. It's like this.
Oh my gosh, that's so annoying. No, Erin, stop.
I feel like that's like a stereotype of how people perceive her Saint
No.
Inez.
I know.
Like,
Oh
was like,
my gosh,
no.
She was cool. She was cool. Okay, she was cool. I believe that.
Listen, I think that's how she talked to the nun who annoyed her with the rosary beads. That's how I picture that conversation going.
So funny.
That's all. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Gosh. All right. Well, on that note, we will bid you all adieu, and we will see you next week.
Can't
All right.
wait.
Bye,
God bless
guys.
y'all. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.